So, hello, my name is Calliope. We are at Holy Ascension Church today in Maplewood, and we're going to be talking about the Ukrainian diaspora and your experiences with it.
And my name is Laura Abel, and we are welcoming a fellow parishioner to talk about her experience.
Hey, howdy. So my name is Elizabeth, and in addition to being a parishioner, this church, I've had the very unique experience of my dad being the priest. So my whole life has been spent in this one church. So essentially, from diapers until now, this has been my stomping ground, and it has been the epicenter of almost every single formative event in my life. And I think you see a lot of people come and go, but you sort of just have that very solid group of community um, here that everyone comes together and vibes off of it. So I also have sort of like this unique experience. I like to joke and call myself like a 1.5 generation because even though my dad was born in America and he's first gen from that side, my mom is from Poland. So I've had the very unique experience of being like a second generation Ukrainian American and learning to speak Ukrainian and read and communicate, but then also having this whole other identity of being the child of an immigrant, um, which, so now when I see people coming through with their kids and even just, I don't know, how things work when you are that first generation and trying to prove something and validate something, I really sympathize with that now. I don't know what else.
I can.
Say?
Give
me some direction.
I will give you direction. Hold up. Okay.
Probe.
I will probe. Ready. Okay, so you've kind of gone into describing your Ukrainian roots. So we can talk about, so where was your family from? What do they know about the place? Have you visited it? Have you learned anything, excuse me, from the stories they shared? And I can ask other questions as well, but we can start with that if you want.
So I do know a little bit about my family history, the Ukrainian side of it. My grandfather was from a village that bordered Romania, and my grandmother was actually born in a DP camp, so in a displaced persons camp. And although she strongly identified Ukrainian and made sure that her children, grandchildren, myself, my sister, and my cousins also strongly identified as Ukrainian and preserving language, culture, everything to that aspect, she is technically not Ukrainian by nationality, by birth, by where she was born. The last person on that side of my family to be born in Ukraine was my great-grandmother. It's my understanding that during the Bolshevik Revolution, my grandfather, having been in the Ukrainian Nationalist Army, they had to flee, and after they fled, they were placed in this camp where they were given some property, somewhere to live, and that's where their family began. And then after that, my grandmother met my grandfather in Poland, and then they came to America by way of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad was born in New York, so he was the first one from that side of the family in America. And the first time I ever went to Ukraine, my sister had gone several times before me on mission trips sponsored by the church, which is great. They go to orphanages there, and they aid with special needs children, and they have like active playtime, learning, just doing whatever the orphanage needs them to do. They do some like repair stuff. It's really, really cool. And the first time I went to Ukraine was 2 years ago. And it's not necessarily like I was waiting to go till I was like mature enough or whatever. It was just there wasn't an opportunity. One of the nice things about being the priest's kid or like being in church and like knowing everyone is people are like really, really friendly to you. And they like come up with these opportunities. And just so happened that these two parishioners were going that summer, and they had heard that I had never been. So they were like, do you want to come with us? Like, I straight thought they were kidding. So, I'm like, yeah, like, okay, whatever, great. I'm like, yeah, we'll arrange it. Like 3 weeks later, they're like, yep, everything's set up. Like, you're going to come with us. And I was like, oh boy. I totally wasn't anticipating it. And I was really, really nervous, mostly because I was scared, like, oh, I'm going to go there and I'm like going to try and flex my skills, my cultural skills. And they're just going to be like, this is American chick, like, American accent, like, trying to communicate with us. But it was refreshing in a way like I had never anticipated. So learning Ukrainian in America is so much different than how they speak in Ukraine. And I think that's true of any language that sort of gets transferred over to a different population, is that we speak this very like classical, this very like literature type of language. Like the words that I know for something are not what they'd be using over there. So they like to say that I spoke like classic Ukrainian. So like when I'm talking to people, they're like, she sounds like a snob, right? But people were like impressed that like they didn't have a concept of someone being second generation in America and learning Ukrainian. They're like, oh, people do that? Like there's like this community in America that does these things? And we're like, yeah, 12 years of my life at Ukrainian school every Saturday, and like to try and preserve this. And when they would introduce me to people, they like had this whole spiel. They're like, this is Elizabeth. She is Ukrainian, but born in America. She speaks Ukrainian. She knows how to read Ukrainian. She knows the street that her great grandmother was born on, and her great grandmother was the last one in Ukraine. Like, it's unbelievable. And they would literally like a speech. They would tell this to every single person that we met. And I think that was like the first time I was ever really, really proud of that preservation process. Because I'm like, they knew it would mean something to someone somewhere down the line. And even though it was difficult and they had to push through and fight really hard to get to that point, they knew the outcome would be important. And they preserved language and culture through the church. Like they built these infrastructures as places where people could do that and have that familiarity of home while still teaching their kids and leading them and making sure things were remembered and stayed important to everyone. So that's a little bit about my family history and my first experience in Ukraine, which was very, very neat. I did go, although when the war was starting in eastern Ukraine, so that was interesting as well.
I'm sorry, did you say that you went while it was happening?
Oh yeah.
So, can you explain that a little bit? That like took me a second.
Yeah. What's wild is that I was pretty much only in the capital. So I was in Kiev, and then I was in that the Kievsky Oblast, so in I guess like the county kind of equivalent, like a state sort of thing, and a little bit south of the capital. And there was one day that we went to the Kievska Pecharska Lavra, which is like the catacombs. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. So underneath the monastery, they have preserved the bodies of the monks. You can go and see them, and it's so neat. It's like a little creepy, but it's very cool. So we're there, and we see like these like Rolls Royce SUVs pull up, and we're like, oh, like we thought this was restricted. Like we walked this area, like we didn't know. And one of the women I was walking with, like turned to her sister and was saying something, and I was like, oh, like would you like we were just chatting, and they're like, did you see the plates? And the plates in Ukraine, like anywhere in Europe, they say which region you're from, and they're like, did you look at them? And I was like, no, I don't care. I just saw that they were nice cars, and they're like, they're from Donbas, like they're Donbas plates, and you see how the war affects people differently, right? Essentially, the case they were posing to me was like, there is no war for rich people. If you're above a certain socioeconomic status, you can do whatever you want. And this is sort of the bias and politics and corruption that's happening there. Like the people who are fighting for Ukraine are people who can't afford not to fight for Ukraine. Like this is their livelihood. This is their identity. It's like no other option. So to say that I was in a war-torn country, like I can state this very confidently, but did not experience what I thought I would be experiencing, where there was sort of like everyone was holding their breath almost, you know what I mean, to wait to see what's coming next. So it was strange because there was a war and there wasn't. So it was really interesting.
So what do you find? So now you've been to Ukraine. So what do you find is different, similar between like the American culture here and then like the Ukrainian culture?
It's almost like a flip flop. Like it's vice versa. That the youth there, I want to say up until the last revolution, that was the Maidan, that was led by the college kids. Then there was a resurgence of certain things, and I'll touch on that. But up until that point, it was very much like they wanted to be Russified just because that was known, and they wanted to be Americanized. They wanted to have sort of like a touch of that culture because everyone thinks that's cool, right? Like whatever's happening in America, like Ralph Lauren jeans and like crop tops, like that's what everyone wants, you know? Meanwhile, Ukrainian American kids here, we're all like, when's, you know, the Deb? When is the Zabava? Like we want to go see our Ukrainian friends and we want to do a kolomeka. And, you know, when a Ukrainian American person has a wedding, we still do the korovai. We have to do everything to the T. Like we want to experience that Ukrainian culture. Like we live for it. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, I don't necessarily know if that's a priority, and maybe that's just my like introspection because they live their day-to-day life. Like they can do that whenever, you know. For me to go get vareniki with my friends is like a big deal for them. Like they make it for dinner and they're like, who cares? You know what I mean? But after the Maidan, what was really nice was the youth, like kids our age and the people who were starting these movements started to really care about Ukrainian culture. They were singing folk songs, like they were making sure to use Ukrainian and not Russian, or what they call their surzik, which is like Ukrainian but with Russian words mixed in. And they were being really, really thoughtful on that. So yeah, I would say it's a little bit of an opposite ends of the spectrum type of thing, but in the common ground that we all want to recognize and appreciate our culture, especially now.
Yeah, it's really cool. Do you have any questions? I don't know. I have like a bunch like to through.
I have to pull up the list again.
So you said that you were there, but I asked this to Michael as well. So there's obviously a lot going on right now in Crimea and just generally in Ukraine. Do you have any thoughts about like, what's happening, what will happen, what the United States might or should do?
Just gonna be like classic Russian aggression. They always wanted something that Ukraine had, and this is just, it's classic. It's what we learn in Ukrainian history, that like, you know, either Ukraine was under Russia's rule or under Poland's rule, and then maybe they had 15 minutes where they were independent and then something else happened and it ruined everything. So for me personally, you know, and Michael said this too, like, am I surprised? No. It's always because, like I say, people are like holding their breath. It's always like you're just anticipating that next fallout. You're just ready for the next thing to happen. And whether it's the political corruption that they're dealing with in elections constantly, or imminent threats now on the border, you know, they're always just waiting for the shoe to drop. And meanwhile, while we're not surprised, it's strange to be like, well, what can we do? You know, especially as a Ukrainian American and like identifying so much with that culture, it's like, well, you watch from the sidelines and you're like, I can't do anything. And I remember watching live streams of people being, shot by snipers on the Maidan, and like 19-year-old kids literally like bleeding out on the street, and you're watching this footage and it's almost unreal, and you're just like, how, why, why doesn't anyone else want to get involved? But in that sense, I understand. No one wants to touch that. It's like when you have a frenemy or something, or like two of your other friends are fighting and you're like, I don't want to get involved. Like, it's such a long-standing rivalry that I think no one knows how to intervene. They're like, well, they've worked it out before in whatever capacity, it'll happen again. The difference this time being is that there is repercussions that go just beyond an annexation, right? So now the President of the United States is known to have a very close relationship with the President of Russia. So if there's another very aggressive move towards Ukraine, like, we know the U.S. isn't going to get involved because we need to be diplomatic in that sense. Okay, cool. Whatever your political beliefs, I'm not going to get into that. But diplomacy, I understand. Ukraine really is just like, we want to be in the EU, but now that these things are happening, their process of being accepted into the EU is going to be held back for who knows how long, right? Because as soon as they would join the Union, then the Union is responsible to protect their borders also, right? So it's so nuanced and multifaceted. But am I hopeful that there will be a resolution? Sure. When that's going to happen, I can't say. I don't know. And I think everyone just really hopes that a solution will come soon, one way or the other. Because then, when you know what you're facing and you know what you're looking at, you know how to deal with it.
Yeah. So my question is a little bit cheerier.
Oh, great.
Like switch vibes for a second. So you talked a little bit about like how you went to Ukraine, and that was the first time that you really felt like proud of that like preservation of Ukrainian heritage. So of what are you most proud with respect to that heritage?
Let's see. It probably sounds a little strange, but so at Christmas time, like, we sing a lot of like Christmas carols, and like there's a lot of them, and there's something called like Narodny Pisni, which means like they're essentially like folk songs, Ukrainian folk songs. And my grandma, who died in 2015, my dad's mom, loved like these folk songs. And I would remember like when we were little and she was like babysitting us, we'd sing the songs, and like she taught us. And I went to Ukraine, and there was like this old guy, and we had gone to like a restaurant for someone's birthday, and like of course like he like breaks out an accordion, like people are singing, like it's a fun time, and I'm singing along with them, and they kind of like side-eye me like, oh, she knows this, whatever, like we thought this was like our thing, but they know this over there. So knowing those songs and like feeling like I was a part of their community in Ukraine, even though I myself felt like an outsider a little bit, kind of on the outside looking in, that was really something I was proud of. That I was like, oh, hey, I can hang with them.
That's really cool.
Awesome.
Okay. I'm good.
Yeah. Awesome.
That was great.
Everything you need.
Yeah.
And also,
Thank you
like,
so
if
much.
you need follow-ups or whatever, like, you can email me at
Okay.
that email, and we can set something up. I'm
Awesome.
free most of the time if you need anything. So,
Thank you so much.
thank
Really
you.
appreciate
It was
it.
a pleasure.